Hey, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, we'll have a few people on in the chat. But I wanted to say hello to everybody who's joining in now, or anybody who's going to watch this on replay. Tonight, I'm going to try to cover as much of the new stuff in my prop as possible. There are some threads. I'm going to go through some websites, some links, some tools. If you have specific questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll try to answer them. I'm not sure how long we're going to go tonight because I do have other stuff. I actually want to use some of tonight for actually getting back to some other stuff. But I'm going to try to cover as much as I can and answer any questions. But there'll probably be more videos coming just because OS7 actually has so much in it. If you missed a couple weeks ago, I had Frederick on. He and I ran through a little bit of what OS7 was as part of alpha testing. But now we're technically in beta, but there's still a lot to be covered. OS7 actually has so much in it. I think this will probably be even if we get out of beta, I feel like there's probably still going to be a lot of education to go along with documentation and stuff that's going to be coming for a good chunk of time. We actually worked on OS7 for a very long period of time, and kind of everything snowballed. Obviously, there's some things that were fixed. There's a lot of additions. There's a lot of changes. And as people are testing, we're also kind of seeing what needs to be better documented. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ProffieOS7 beta thread, I'll bring that up as well. If you're not, so we kind of covered this even with alpha testing between Frederick and I. If you're not really comfortable or you're brand new to Proffie, the alpha and beta testing might be a little bit more than you want it to, bite off. Everybody's welcome to try the stuff, but typically, even in beta, there's going to be a lot of updates. There's going to be things that aren't working perfectly. There's going to be, by beta, there's not a ton of bugs, but there could still be a bug or two. So if you're brand new, it's not really the best way to get your feet wet. It's better to just wait for everybody else to kind of test everything and then get full release. And then also, you do want to keep up to date with it. So particularly, I know everybody's really eager for OS7. I can't blame them. But even if you are beta testing, be sure you're always going back to the Crucible thread to get the latest updates. So right now we're on 7.2, but I think there's a couple of updates that I just saw go across. They're all small things, but you always want to make sure when you're testing that you're grabbing the latest version. So always, like, if you downloaded something even like yesterday, and then you're going to test it over the weekend, before you go to start testing, I recommend going back to the beta thread on the Crucible. Just see if Frederick put together another zip file, because if he did, you're going to want to test that version. And that's part of what testing is you always want to test the most recent version, because what you could be using, if you use a previous version, you may run into something that was already fixed. And then not only do you spend time testing something that was already corrected, but you technically might report something that was already known. So that's not really the best way to handle beta. So always do check in with the beta thread before doing any testing, even if it's only been a day or two since you downloaded. It depends on what gets submitted, what gets found, and how quickly Frederick's able to update it. But he'll always post it in the beta thread. So that being said, let's get into my prop now. As I said, anybody who's on live, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I am going to be looking at the other screen to demo some stuff and talk about stuff, but I will peek back at the chat. So if I don't respond to you immediately, I'm going to keep checking back time to time, but you don't really need to see me for this stuff. So I'm going to zoom in on the screen. And hopefully I don't have anybody in chat yet, but hopefully there's a few of you on and you can hear me. If anybody has audio issues, please let me know. I tested everything before we start, but for some reason when you go live, this stuff loves to start messing with you. So if anybody's on and you're not hearing any audio, you're also probably not hearing me ask if you hear audio, but we'll get going. So OS 6, when I, particularly for my prop, for OS 6, the biggest piece of it was obviously edit mode. And the goal with OS 6, from my point of view, I do have some people in chat. Hey, Nick, how's it going? All right, good. So whenever there's nobody in the chat, I'm always afraid I'm just talking and nobody's hearing me. Hey, I got Jamie. Hey, Megtooth is on. Great. Appreciate it, guys. And as I said, questions, throw them in the chat. But now that I know people can hear me, that's even better. I'm going to kind of little backstory of OS 6 just to segue into OS 7, and then we'll get really talking about this stuff. So for OS 6, as most of you know, edit mode was a really big project. And my goal in OS 6, and obviously there was a lot of stuff thrown in. but was to try to make the Proffie board as accessible as possible to as many new users as possible. So that's where edit mode came in, and that was working with Frederick. So back and forth, a lot of stuff that I put into edit mode was because of what he developed, or I came up with an idea and he would kind of make it work, or vice versa. But I would say if I had to kind of just put a summary of what, particularly from my prop file point of view, the goal of OS 6 for my prop was to make it easier for users and to make it easier for installers like Megtooth and Mountain Sabers and all you guys who do installs. Edit mode was to try to help you out. Now, it was my attempt at that. So through feedback from Megtooth and a few others, some of the features that I added to OS 6 that in my mind were supposed to make things easier, made some things a little more challenging. So what I've done for OS 7 is I kind of took the premise of making it easier, but I also added a lot of customization, and a lot of that's through defines. But there's also other changes that were done to the prop. Now, as I said, the goal for OS 6 with my prop was going to be to make it as easy as possible for everybody to get the most out of Proffie. If OS 7 to me is kind of the opposite of that. Not that I don't want to make things easier, but I put so much focus on OS 6 and edit mode and all that stuff to make it easier for new people. OS 7 is almost to take the restrictor plate off, if you will, and just blow up the possibility. So I've always really, ever since Megtooth first introduced me to Proffie board, the ability to do really cool, unique, and imaginative stuff is what I love. And there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, we can do a ton. We could do a ton in OS 5. We could do a ton more in OS 6. But OS 7, we just blow the roof off of it in terms of possibilities. And I wanted to make my prop be able to still help new people, also allow for a lot more customization. But then the last piece of it is to enable a lot of this really crazy stuff. And with the understanding that not everybody who buys a Proffie board wants the crazy stuff at first. That's kind of what I do find. I find a lot of people, I just want a saber that does, has cool effects and sounds really good and that I can show off. And then inevitably, for most of my experiences, once you realize what you can do with it, you say, well, what else is there? So what I'm doing with my prop is enabling a lot of features that aren't going to be necessarily easily available through other props. The other prop makers can add this stuff if they want some of it. They may not want some, they may want, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of put everything on the table with my prop and then allow users or installers to back it off to the level that they're comfortable with. So that's kind of the goal there was if you go full tilt on my prop, kind of the sky's the limit and beyond. But if there's stuff that you don't want, if there's stuff that you don't use, if there's stuff you don't need, I added a bunch of defines, as well as a bunch of other new kind of approaches that will let that prop almost slim down to the bare bones. So in order to make that work, because there's so many possibilities now, I built a config tool, and that's a whole other thread, and there is a video on that already, but I do want to touch on that, because in order to make it easier for everybody to kind of customize the prop, I also had to make a way where you could actually keep track of what it is you're going to get when you do those customizations. So I'm going to start in kind of the thread on the Crucible, and I zoomed in a good amount, but I'll read this off in case it's not as easy to read on screen. And I'll glaze through some of it because some of it's pretty straightforward. And then we're going to jump into the tool. And the tool is kind of the easiest method I could come up with to make sure that everybody's able to know what they're getting and also help both new and old users see everything that's possible. But so biggest updates with my prop, there were a couple minor little fixed things. So OS 6, some people had already run into it. There was actually the OS itself. It wasn't my prop, but there was a 400 millisecond delay between clashes. It was just kind of a catch-all that was in the prop base, which is the base OS, that I didn't realize was there until people started to spam it. Basically, if you did a clash, there was a kind of a holding period of 400 milliseconds. It only applied to my prop because of the methodology for real clash. So it didn't really come up a lot in testing, but if you tried to like spam like every 200 or 300 milliseconds on clashes, you would miss certain clashes. So we fixed that. I took away, there had been a gesture delay. We had taken a couple of them away in OS 6, but there was a few remaining. But basically, people want to be able to ignite and turn, retract and ignite and retract without any break. The original reason for those delays was to prevent accidentally turning your saber on and off. But in trying to do that, we obviously had people who do want to use it, so I took that away as well. So if you like do way too many twists or whatever, you are going to get immediate retraction and ignition, but that's more just adjust your behavior. So that's gone. And then somehow through, actually it was probably 9 months or 10 months of edit mode being in the out full release, that somebody noticed that the menu was missing an option, which was the off option. So that got added. So those were the kind of the fixes, if you will, that were put in. And then I did add some new capabilities, obviously. The first of which was the ability to do the force quote, so the hybrid force quote. You can now do that while off. That was actually something that was supposed to make it in OS 6 and somehow just kind of sat on the sidelines. But the idea now is if you want to enable a force sound or do a quote while off, and quotes we'll get to, because there's actually now so many different ways to do quotes that it's really up to you how you want to do them. But now you can also do that while off. The controls we'll get to in a second. But that means you can use your saber and do quotes without it having to be ignited. There is the quick select capability on presets. It's what it does is quick select essentially allows you to use the preset menu, which is where you can dial to any preset. And then if you just hold the button, it's going to actually select it and ignite it immediately. The idea being almost like a really quick Kyber selector, preset selector. So instead of just rolling through presets and pressing the button to choose it and then pressing the button again to ignite, now if you hold the button when you're on the preset you want, it's going to choose it and ignite it immediately. And then there's also a way to set up where that's automatic on boot, which is a whole other define, which we'll also cover. I did have to change the gesture sleep control, and that's tied to some of the other new features. So those of you who are using OS 6, the gesture sleep, it used to be a hold button and twist. I think one button might have even been the same control, but now it's going to be a hold button and a clash. And then for one button, I think you have to point one direction. But there was a change to that control. So if you're used to using gesture sleep on OS 6, I had to change it for OS 7 for good reason. So there is a change in that control. There is some defines to enable a circular menu. And this came, so when I was trying to make it so my prop was as customizable as possible, I did take a look at Brian Connor's prop and actually reached out to him. And a couple of the things that he had in his prop that he said were probably worthwhile, I moved over into my prop. And those are now enabled via define. And the idea being I wanted to make my prop kind of be able to be used by everybody who is used to using anything. So I obviously did take in and merge SA22C's prop in OS 6 for one button control. And then there are some modifiers with defines for the 2-button controls. And then I took a couple of things from BC, Brian Connor's prop in OS 6, and I've added them in OS 7. And again, they're enabled via defines. And one of them is the circular menu. What that means is the volume menu in OS 6, for those of you who aren't familiar, actually uses the dial. So you turn your hilt to go up or down, but it used to max out. So you used to go turn right and hit a max, turn left to hit a min. Now you can turn past the max and it starts over again. So it essentially makes it a circular dial where when you get to max, if you keep going, you go to the minimum amount. If you go to min and keep turning, you go to the maximum amount. So it just lets you get to that easier. And then I took that same concept and I applied it to the dimming menu. So the dim menu is part of edit mode, but now there is the ability to do that with the circular menu as well, which means you can go from the brightest to the dimmest setting just by continuing past it by turning right. That obviously does require the edit mode menu or the edit settings menu, which we're going to touch in a couple of bullet points. There's also a bunch of the defines to disable features, which we'll kind of touch on them. I think a lot of people have already run into them and enjoyed them. So the biggest ones were the copy preset, the edit style, and then the edit font. What I did in OS 6 on my prop was I made them able to be accessed with or without edit mode. And the reason for that in my mind was so if somebody wanted to be able to quickly make a copy of a preset, change the font, change the color, change the style, they could do it without having to load the full edit mode menu, which typically takes I think it was around 6 or 7% of memory. So if you wanted to save some memory but still get those features, I made it so that those were button controls as well. We called them on the fly. I know Megtooth wasn't a fan, and a few other people said they had issues with it. So these defines disable those features. If you want to use them, you don't put the define in. If you don't want them, you're going to put the disable define, and it'll turn those features off. That way you don't have to worry about them, but they are still accessible to you if you just pull away the define. The special ability is kind of going to be its own topic. I'll touch on it today, but there's so much related to that I'll probably have to do another video for that. Because I do have a bunch of tools that'll kind of help with that. It's a little bit ambiguous to explain, but what essentially special abilities is it's almost like gives you 8 controls on the prop that can do whatever you want, and they are controlled through the style. So that's one of the biggest changes to OS 7. OS 7 we made it so styles can actually not only control and talk to the fonts, but they can actually talk to the prop file if the props file is set up. So at this point in time, to my knowledge, my prop is the only prop that's set up to allow for these features to work. Other people may update their props or try to take pieces of it, but as of right now, for everything I've seen, I don't think anybody has that set up. So the special abilities and then the part of the styles that's coming that will talk to the prop right now runs through my prop. And what that enables is it really makes it so that the prop kind of continues to run in the background. But the idea being, and I talked about this in a few videos, is every style now, if you build it to do so, can act as if it's its own app. And what that means is you can get different controls doing different things in each preset. So typically a prop file, a little late in the conversation, but a prop file is controlling what button presses do what, and then adding some features, what menus are available to you, and then now that we have gestures, what gestures do what. And that was universal for your OS based on the prop you chose. So if you chose my prop and you enabled swing on ignition and you had a 2-button setup, all the buttons did the same thing. The swing turned on the ignition and you were done. And that was going to be for every one of your presets because the prop is universal. Well, the prop is still universal. It still does all the basic stuff. But the style code coming for OS 7 actually gives you the ability to put pieces of style code in that will then they don't really override the prop, but they work with the prop to do other things. So you could have it technically where you write a style that enables swing on, but you don't have swing on active in the prop. And then only when you go to that preset, you can swing it on. If you go to a different preset and the prop doesn't have swing on, there's no swing on available. So it lets you customize the controls down to the preset level. Now there's a lot of different ways to set all this up, which is why it's probably going to be a separate video, maybe a series of videos, because by making what we've done, by making the style code essentially able to act as its own app, we've made it so that every preset has the ability to be completely unique, not only in what you see, but how you use your saber and what happens when you do certain things. So I'm working on my library, and that's going to be a big piece. I do have the config tool here, which is another piece, which we'll hopefully get to in a couple minutes. And then there'll be a lot of documentation coming. But so special abilities is kind of tied to being able to make it so that your presets, every preset can, it doesn't have to, but every preset can be completely unique. So you can have a completely different experience on every preset. So instead of having your Proffie board saber act the same and all you're doing is changing visual effects and changing the sounds, you can have it so your Proffie board saber acts almost like a console, or acts as a console is kind of a good thing. And every preset with that unique style code acts as if you were changing the apps or loading, for us older guys, loading a different cartridge in, and gives you a unique experience on every preset. And so setting it up, though, obviously is a little more complex. So that's where the library is going to come into play, the config tool, and then additional explanations and probably several more videos. Let's see. As I noted earlier, I did see Brian jump into the chat. See he's working now. Hey, Lyle, thanks for joining. Hey, Mountain Saber. Sorry, I missed the chat for a little bit there. If you guys have questions, do throw them in. I am still peeking over at it. The BC control variations, those are some new defines that let you take a few of the features that BC Brian Connor had in his prop for OS 6. I've moved them in for OS 7 just so that you can move into my prop for OS 7 if you want, but still have those features. Spin mode, actually, I realized I didn't do a video on spin mode. I'm sitting out here. I have a bunch of videos that are on my list of videos to shoot, and I just haven't gotten to them. But spin mode is a new feature on my prop that I probably should have done a video on. It's for those of you who are good at spinning your saber, doing the flare type stuff. I'm not really good at that, probably why I didn't get to shoot the video yet. But it basically disables all clashes, all lockups, and everything. While you're in spin mode, you basically can twirl your saber, spin your saber, throw your saber, catch your saber, anything you want to do those really cool effects. Particularly, I know a lot of people do those for different videos on social media, and never worry about getting a clash. So if you spin it too hard and catch it, instead of getting a clash or a lockup or something, it just ignores all of that. And it just lets you have the lights and the effects, and you can do blasts. But everything else, clash or impact related, gets deactivated so that you can, if you're too, cumbersome, or if you catch it too hard, or you hit it against something, you catch the tip, or you hit your leg or whatever, you can continue to just spin and keep the light looking like it is without that interruption of the sound and the visual effect. So it's a new feature that's available. It's just a define, and then there's a button control related to it, but you can enable that. It's something that I know there was some people who not necessarily asked for it, but after watching some videos on social media and seeing some people doing these videos, whenever they would inevitably make a clash, it kind of threw them off. So I was like, oh, we could probably deactivate those. So that's what spin mode is. It's not a washing machine. Let's see. Spoken battery percent and volt is now available based on blade angle. That was also kind of something. Brian did that a little different in his prop, but I moved that into my prop. I did a little bit different implementation just because I have a little bit fewer controls available. So this one's based on blade angle. He had it so you would do two different controls to do volt or percent. For mine, it's the same control, but you're just pointing up or pointing down. And then increment by. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of new options for edit mode. They also work on Workbench, or they will work on Workbench. Let's see. There's two new colors: Alt Color 2, Alt Color 3, Style Option 2, Style Option 3. Those are kind of universal to allow you to do a lot more, which is tied to that special ability stuff. And then there's going to be two new arguments, and they're tied to the bend time. So for those of you, originally it was called accelerating, decelerating transition. So my first videos on it, when I was tinkering with it, was a little bit different than what Frederick actually developed. Actually, Frederick's is obviously better. He knows this stuff more. But now it's called bend time. So it's I think I had some older videos that talk about it as acceleration and deceleration. The actual function that you use now is a bend time function, and it works in all the transitions. But the ignition option 2, retraction option 2 arguments are in support of those. And what that will do, once the library comes out, or if you want to build your own, is it will not only let you edit through edit mode or Workbench the time of your ignition, the timing of it, but if you want to have it where it accelerates or decelerates, those are going to be the two arguments that control them. So those will be added to the OS 7 library as an editable option, so that you can technically have the same ignition used on multiple presets, but you can have one preset where it just ignites at full normal speed. You can have another preset using the exact same style, but you can edit the ignition time, the ignition option or the retraction option, and have it start out slow and speed up. And then on your third one, you can have the exact same style, but have it run where it starts out fast and then slows down. And that's all controlled now with a new argument, so it makes it editable. So you can apply the same style and get even more out of it using the options. So options in edit mode and Workbench basically allow you to take that style code and use it in multiple presets and have very different, unique things in all those presets. So those are all new arguments coming. Related to edit mode, the edit settings menu. So edit settings is a stripped down version of edit mode. It only controls volume, clash threshold, all the ignition gestures on and off, brightness, as well as blade length. So you don't do any style editing with it. So if the idea being, it basically cuts the size of the menu in half, which gives you more memory. And because you can use Workbench, you can use Workbench to do all of it. But the idea is you can use Workbench to set up your presets and do your fonts, your tracks, your colors, all the option stuff that would be related to styles. But then I figure on the fly, the more the stuff that people really need, like if you're at an event or if you're somewhere else, or if you have like 2 different length blades, that's the type of stuff that the settings menu is really good at, is that you're able to just adjust your blade length, adjust the volume, adjust the brightness, turn on and off the gestures, all those things that are considered settings from a menu system, and then leave like the bigger editing of colors and styles and fonts and tracks to be done through Workbench. Or if you've some people just set up their configs and they have all the presets they want and they don't really need to do that editing. So now edit settings menu is just it's basically, there was an edit settings sub menu of edit mode. Now we've just made it so that is its own thing. So if you just want a pared back, simple way to still do all the blade editing and all, or the blade length and all that other stuff, you would use the edit settings menu. Depending on your config, I think it was saving around 4% of memory, give or take. So it just gives you a little more memory to be able to do other stuff. Sorry, let me peek. So a couple more people join. Hey, Obi Dan. Hey, Jamie, Brian. Okay. The settings menu was something I thought would still be of value, and still you can still do all the editing through Workbench on anything, but it just trying to save a little bit of memory for people who'd rather get a couple extra presets out of it versus having to do all the editing on the Saber. Let's see, we've got the quick select on boot. I talked about that a little earlier. It basically just means if you use that define, please, because I've already I was talking to somebody who had no idea what was happening, and I asked them what define they did. So quick select on boot. What that means is when you first boot your Saber, when power is first applied, it is automatically in the select preset menu. That means no preset is active. And as soon as you start turning your hilt, it's going to run through all your presets. The idea being, for those of you who have a lot of presets or don't necessarily always want to start on the same preset, you can use that define. Every time you boot the Saber, it automatically boots itself into the select preset menu, which uses the hilt to choose a preset. And then you would do your button presses. So excuse me, I need a drink. Just talking too long. You would use 1 or 2 button control, but you would get out of the preset menu by selecting your preset, or the new quick select, where you hold a button and it chooses it and ignites it, just so that you're able to quickly get into it. But keep in mind, with that define, every time you boot, your Saber is in select preset mode. So I had only one person, but they had the define active. They didn't quite know what it did, and they were wondering why every time they turned their Saber on, it was jumping through all the fonts. They thought it was a bug. It's not a bug. That's actually what that define does. So I think I had a video on it, but it was from the proof of concept stuff, and I think it kind of got lost in the wash because it was part of other stuff. But so that's what that is. And then the quiet track player. So if you use track player, it has obviously you need the comment folder, and it tells you what's true. So you can choose the loop, which just plays the same song over. You can choose random, or you can choose rotate. And there's a voice in the menu that says loop, rotate, or random. And some people didn't like that. So if you use the quiet track player, I'll get to the exact define. All it does is track player still works. It does everything the same. It just doesn't tell you what it's doing. So you have to know, if you activate the loop menu, that your song is going to loop. Or if you activate the random menu, it's going to play random tracks. Or if you choose the rotate, that's going to play all your tracks in order. It just doesn't have that voice play over your track for those of you who didn't want it. So again, more customization. So, and all the defines are written out here with a little bit of a description, but those are the big capabilities. So I spent a long time on this. I haven't seen any questions. So I'm going to jump over to the config tool just to show how this all kind of comes together and kind of the easiest way for everybody to kind of see everything. But you can also read through here. There are, I'll touch on these in the tool. So first off, I do have a page related to my prop with all the information. It has links to all the new capabilities. It obviously also has the controls, although you're going to see in a second, this changes a lot. And then all the defines as well as gestures. But this guy right here is kind of, this tool, I did roll it out early in OS 6. For those of you, more because I wanted to get it tested, but also because it still is helpful for OS 6. But it was intended all along for OS 7 because of all this customization. And I'm going to roll through this a little quickly because we kind of covered this. So anybody I see a few more in the chat. Hey, Space made it. How's it going, Space and BK Sabers? Thanks for coming on. So let me get to this config tool. So you would just click over here, or there's a thread on it on the Crucible. And this tool, there is a video on this tool. So I am going to skim through a good chunk of this to show very specific parts. But if you want to use this tool, if you want to understand it, the video at the top, I already shot to cover pretty much the starting point. Now, there's actually more coming. So this is the first, it's version 2.01. There's many more things coming. This is to get us started with beta. But as we get closer to release, there's actually a lot of new functionality that I'm also building. I'm kind of balancing building tools, helping with beta testing, doing updates, trying to get my library prepped. So I'm kind of juggling a lot of different things. So I'm doing little bits at a time. But the tool is ready. It is, to my knowledge, working very well. If you do run into a bug, please report it here so I can find it. But let's get to the important part, right? So as I said, the top section I'm going to skip over. If you want to learn how to use it here or follow directions, this tool does let you build up to 6 unique configs and it stores them. That's part of that video. But what we want to look at is all the possible defines. And I'm going to specifically do my prop section because that's what I want to show tonight. But there's a lot of other controls that aren't dependent upon my prop. So when you basically, this whole tool is meant to be very simple, pick and choose what you want, and it creates the config for you. But if you already have an existing config, you don't have to build a full config out of this. It will let you build the config top section, which is essentially your define section. So the idea behind that is that there's so many defines now. I mean, my prop alone, I think I probably do laps around the number of defines in the OS. So keeping track of them gets to be hard, even for people who have been using Proffie since 1.312. So I made this tool to help. So you're just going to check off anything you want to have active and uncheck anything you don't want. By default, the tool has the basics loaded up. But if you want to customize, this is where the easiest way to do customization, whether you're brand new or a seasoned user of my prop, is with this tool. That's kind of why I wanted to segue into this. So you can choose to activate whatever you want. So we're in the control and props features section. There's a bunch of sections for all the other defines, but this is the one we'll focus on. If you want to activate the edit mode menu, first things first, I'm in OS 6. I do have to show the top. The defines are controlled by the version. This tool will do a config for OS 6 or a config for OS 7. So to see the new stuff, I got to switch over. And it says alpha just because I have a beta update that's not ready yet. I'm still debugging it. But it says ProffieOS7 alpha. It's the same thing. But when you choose this, it's going to give you all the new defines. Now we can scroll down. And we're in this section here. So it's going to have all of the new capabilities as well as anything for OS 6. And you're going to check off the ones you want. So if you want edit mode, you check here. If you just want edit settings menu, you check here. You can't have both because they're kind of the same thing. You have to pick one. But I give descriptions of everything so you can read more about it. Where where it's necessary, there's always going to be the red text is a link to more documentation. But you would go through and pick. So let's say I'm going to do edit settings menu. I definitely want my special abilities. I can't actually spin, but for sake of argument, I'm going to add spin mode. And then let's see, I'm going to leave that stuff off. And then for hopefully Megtooth is still on. I'll disable the change font and the change style and the copy preset. I'm going to now disabling the battle mode toggle. I'm going to touch on this. I'll probably have to do a little more write-up of this. This kind of fits into that concept of the presets taking control of the prop. And it kind of ties not only to special abilities, but to a bunch of other stuff that lets you change how battle mode works. So by default, and there's now so many, OS 7 with all the customization also means there's so many different ways to do the same thing that it's probably going to take a little bit of trial and error for everybody to figure it all out. But battle mode's been around since OS 5. By default, if you just use a basic gesture ignition, you automatically enter battle mode. There's defines that disable that. There's the no BM, that's no battle mode. I know people had other ideas for what that meant. It's no battle mode. That means you can use swing on. So if you use Fett263 swing on no BM as the define, you would do the swing on ignition, but it would not enter battle mode. By default in OS 5, all of the ignition, all the gesture ignitions automatically enable battle mode because that's how it was set up. So you can disable that. But there always was a toggle. So for those of you who never ever want to use battle mode and don't want it, you can technically remove it completely by choosing all of the gesture ignitions with the no BM underscore and then checking this box off. And that will take away the normal toggle, which is for normal operation to go in and out of battle mode. And then if you have no gesture ignition that uses battle mode and no toggle button that uses battle mode, essentially battle mode is not going to exist on your Saber. The code to run it still is there because that's actually intertwined with a lot of other things. It's minimal amount of code anyway, but that technically is used in the real Clash. It's used in the Clash Impact capability where how hard you hit does different things to your Saber. So we're not going to remove all the bits and pieces of it, but for your intents and purposes, it's gone. However, as part of special abilities and part of the new style code capabilities, there's also a way for you to deactivate battle mode from the prop controls and make it so that one preset can still use battle mode, which is the other reason we keep those pieces there. And that, as I said, I'll kind of have to dive into more in the upcoming videos. But essentially, even if you use this and disable battle modes toggle or multi-blast toggle, the reason for those to be disabled is, first of all, for users who don't want them. But secondly, if you want to make it so only certain presets on your Saber enable battle mode or enable multi-blast, you would then disable the controls in the prop and enable the controls in your style. And your style would then make it so that certain presets act differently. And this is that whole special abilities. It's almost a rabbit hole of capabilities, but that's also tied to that. So we'll come back and talk about these guys in an upcoming review of special abilities and all that stuff. But we'll go through. I'm going to skip through this. Now, I should touch on this. Same thing with quotes. So OS 7 will let you do quotes 5 different ways. I think we have 5 different ways to do quotes now. And 4 of them are what we would call special abilities, where they could be different in every preset. And I have a video from the proof of concept that kind of shows this. But you can, right now, OS 6, you have the hybrid force quote player. What that was depending on 1 button or 2 button, if you do the force effect, by default, it plays the force. If you point down and do the force effect, it toggles over to quote mode. And then if you hold it parallel or pointing up again, every subsequent force effect would play only a quote. And then you would point it back down, do the quote effect, and it would toggle back to the force effect. And that was kind of because we were running out of button capabilities, and I wanted to introduce quotes as a controllable feature. So I just joined it with force effect. people who want to just have the force effect button do the force effect, you would disable quote player. And that just turns it back to the OS 5 version, where when you do the force effect, whether you're pointing up or down, it only plays a force sound. As I said, the other part of that and the reason for that disable is because now I can have my presets, the style code in my presets control how the quotes work. So you can set up multiple different ways for quotes to work within each style. And those controls can be changed preset to preset. So you can have one preset that doesn't do anything with quotes, has no quotes, you don't have to worry about them. And then you can have another preset that has 2 or 3 different methods of using quotes. And there's a number of them, which again falls into that special abilities, which is going to be its whole other thing. But there's new ways to both set up the font for the quotes and set up the style code in the presets, so you can have your quotes act differently in every preset. And the other videos kind of cover this, but you would be able to have one preset where you can actually have it set up with a dialogue between 2 different characters and have the 2 character controls separate. So you can have one control, have one character speak using certain quotes, and have a second character speak using other quotes. Technically, you could get away with 8 characters if you set your font up correctly. Yeah, 8 slots. I got 8 slots. If you want to get that crazy with it, obviously you have to set the font up to support it, and the style code has to have the capability, and then use it with my prop, but that would be possible. You can also set up what I call the mini MyCom, and if Megtooth is still on, it's not a real MyCom. What it does, though, is similar in that it lets you actually group quotes based on theme. They can be based on character, can be based on theme, but you could group all the affirmative quotes in one grouping in your font. You can group all the negative quotes in another grouping. You can group, all of your taunts in another one. And then again, with the special ability controls, set up so that one control does your affirmatives, one control does your negatives, one control does your taunts, and then whatever else you want. And you would, working by setting your font up and then setting the style code up to control that, this is that synergy capability that falls into special abilities. You can have it so that one preset does all that, a different preset does other things, a different preset has dialogues, other presets have no quotes, and the controls would vary preset to preset. So disable quote player is kind of, again, a twofold thing. For those who just want the force effect to just do force all the time, you would disable quote player, but it doesn't mean you can't use quotes. You can then take your quotes, move them into the special abilities, build them into your style. Again, there is font changes that would be required to support that, but then you can have it so that you can set the quote controls up different or specific to each preset. So more coming on that, but that's where that comes into play. And then all this other stuff is kind of the same. You can disable the track player prompts, as we said earlier. There's a few. So this is the BC control variations. There's a couple of them. You'll see them noted here. Those are the control updates that I took from Brian Connors with his permission. Prop. So if you wanted to replace stab with melt full time, you can do that. And then so you would go through, choose all your options. And there are a lot. This is where the no BM stuff comes into play. So I changed it so that the menu is easier to read. But you can disable swing on mission. You can swing on with, it activates the battle mode and skips the pre-on. You can have it so swing on activates battle mode but uses the pre-on. You can have it so that swing on skips the pre-on only, but it does not activate battle mode. Or you can have swing on that skips battle mode but still uses the pre-on. And that's for all the gesture ignitions. You can set those in here, everything else. So once that's all done, and once you've checked through everything, we're going to skip over the preset stuff. This is where I wanted to get to tonight, and then I'll take any questions that came up. I see a few more things written in there, so I will get to them. So I'm going to skip over presets for now, and we're going to get to the bottom. And this is where, related to my prop, I wanted to show this part of the tool. Now, if you build out your full config here with presets and everything else, you can build a full config. And this tool actually builds it and allows you to now download the .h file itself. So the older one, you had to copy and paste. This one will not only let you build a full config and save it to the site to be able to come back and work on it in the future, technically even down the line a year from now. It also lets you download it as a .h file so that you can just download it straight to your ProffieOS folder, ProffieOS config folder, and use it right away. So it took the copy and paste out of it. You can still copy and paste if you want, but that was the new feature also added. As I said, those of you joining late, there's a video at the very top of this tool that explains a lot of the main controls, so check that out. But here's what we want. If you just want, so say you have your own existing config file, everything's great, all good. You want to move into OS 7 without new styles, because obviously new styles you have to add to it. You would just click Generate Config, top. And when you click just this Generate Config top, it only generates the top section of your config based on what you chose above. So all the defines I chose using just these checkboxes are all now going to be properly built into the top section. And then you would just copy this. And then this is the part, though, if you're doing this, you do want to know how to use your config. You would just go to your config, and you're going to want to get rid of the config top section and the config prop. And then we would just paste our new one in, and it gives us all the new defines. So the tool is intended to let you build a full config, but for those who don't need that or don't want that, but you're trying to figure out what all the defines do and you don't necessarily want to go hunting and pecking, you can use that config tool to generate just the top section. The other piece of this, the other reason for this tool, and I know I've shown this in a few places, but it might be new to you, is because my prop is now so customizable where you're changing and disabling and enabling all these different features. You can also use this tool, choose all of your defines like I showed, and I skipped through a bunch, and then it's going to give me a custom button and control list. And this is looking at if it's a 1-button or 2-button saber, what prop is used. So it's either my prop or the default. The default obviously is a very simple control. But you can still use this tool without my prop. I don't have the other props in here. It's kind of twofold. The coding that lets me do this takes a really long time. So I couldn't take on all the other props. That was the reason I took the controls from a few of the features that Brian had in his prop that I didn't have and moved them into mine. And then, as I said, I already moved SA22C stuffs over. There's a couple others. I know Dimitri has a prop, but to be honest, I don't think he's updated it since OS 5. And there was a new gentleman, and I don't remember his name, and I apologize. But he built a very simplified prop really for his specific use. By all means, everybody's invited to check it out and use it. It was very, very pared down, a very specific use thing. And again, with all the new features and everything, I wasn't going to be able to build a control system for it. So my prop is where you would get the defines and stuff from this tool. If you're using another prop, you do still have to kind of build that section, and we're not going to be able to do the button controls for you. But if you're using my prop or the default prop, use this tool, and we can generate a custom control list. And this is for both the user and for all you installers out there. So choosing all of the defines that we did generates this specific control list that you can print. It is designed to be printable. I didn't do any colors and graphics and stuff. First of all, to keep it simple. Secondly, so that you can print it and shrink it so that you don't have to do these full giant 8.5 by 11 papers. You can shrink this and it should still be somewhat legible. But if you go through, choose all your defines and set up the prop part, generate either a full config or the config top, you do get the blue button that supports what the controls are. And this control list is specific to the customized controls that you've made with all the new defines. And it covers everything. If anybody sees any issues, please let me know. I spent a lot of time testing this, though. This should be perfect. But there's a ton of code in here. So if I have a typo, if I spelled something wrong, just put it in that thread and I'll take a peek at it. But now you can print this out. This actually also has page breaks built into it, so it will print out and nicely break the pages. But it gives you all of your very specific controls, because most of you know in this page, this page, I do have 2 and 3 button controls, and also the top section of the prop has all the controls. But because we've added so much customization, one one config to the next, the controls can be very different. So that's where that tool is also helpful and useful, and in some ways important, is that you're going to be able to get the exact specific controls based on the features you chose. And because I chose the edit settings instead of edit mode, it gives me the edit settings controls, and it also gives me the edit settings menu. So this printable control button structure is specific to the options you have selected using the tool to build that config top and or a full config. And then the other piece of this, a little less so right now, this will come into play a little bit more, but also is the supported sounds list. This gets tied in also with style code because the styles now talk to the fonts. So this also generates, and it will tell you the names of the supported sounds because there are some new sounds in OS 7 that were introduced as part of the Synergy package. But there's also new ways to use those existing sounds because of all the new capabilities, like the new quotes capabilities. We also have obviously alt fonts, which I think that's probably a whole other episode I'm going to have to do, and a bunch of other stuff. So there's still a lot more I do want to get to. I will try to be doing, I'm trying to get to these every couple of weeks. Like I said earlier, I am juggling a lot of different things for OS 7, as well as obviously being a dad and a coach and stuff. But as I get stuff done and as I get stuff ready, I will do more of these videos. Obviously, I do want to answer some questions. So I'm going to switch over. If you have questions, put them in the chat now so I can start answering them. Let me say hi to everybody who I may have missed. I think I caught most of you guys coming in. Let me see some questions here. Let me clear this so it's not so bright on my face. But a ton more coming, and there's a ton more this tool does. So definitely check this tool out. Definitely, if you have not already, watch this video. It explains a good chunk of it. There's still more coming. I do have to do more demos, but that'll help, and then we'll get into it. So let me see. Hey, Lyle. Yeah, so that is really one of the big reasons I built the tool. Was even myself, I find, people ask me how you do certain things or how certain things somebody did. They say, oh, I saw such and such had this. How do I do it? I'm like, oh, it's the define. And people are like, oh, there's so many defines on your prop. It's so hard. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know. And I just doubled it with OS 7. So this tool is to help that. So that it is a very long web page. But all of the defines they're grouped. And then they're also, I give the descriptions underneath them. I also put them in more plain English. So in a lot of cases, the defines themselves aren't the most descriptive because they're really just meant, all a define is basically a piece of code that the compiler looks at, and it says, if this exists, include this code. So it's just a way to add and take away stuff. But over time, people have kind of started reading defines, and we try to make them make some sense, but we also obviously, something that's really complicated, you can't put that in like, 2 or 3 words. And the prefix, so the prefix of Fett263 or a prefix of SA22C or a prefix of BC, those are for support because they're specific to the prop. So when Frederick sees those defines, he knows what prop they came from, because there's certain defines that look similar, but they don't work in each prop. So like all of my defines that are specific for my prop will start with Fett263, but that's obviously more characters being used up. So I wanted to make it so that the defines made sense. So the tool just kind of says what the define is supposed to do. It doesn't necessarily say the exact name of the define. The tool also, because it's using plain English, though, is easier for you to understand what the defines are supposed to do, so you can choose them. And then it properly puts the exact same, it puts the correct define in. And then the other thing I do see people from time to time do when we're reviewing configs, they have a typo, or they use uppercase and lowercase, or they forget an underscore. So even though they have the right idea of the define, typos get in the way, this tool takes that out of the equation as well. It's always going to be the right define specific to what you want. But it is for everybody. So originally when I rolled out the first one as kind of an alpha test, it was really to help new users because I saw a lot of people getting hung up on the common folder and having a little bit of trouble with setting presets. But the tool, its inception, the idea of it was to support everybody new and old, to be able to see everything really quickly and easily. Now, all right, quickly within reason. I mean, when you have 100 different customization possibilities, you still have to read 100 different customization possibilities. But I mean, that's kind of first world problems at this point. But it's easier. You just check what you want, don't check what you want. If there's drop down menus, like I showed for the twist on or swing on, twist on ignitions, that's because there's multiple defines available. And again, I put them in plain English so you can pick what you want without having to know what the define said. Because those defines, especially like the no BM or they were harder for people to understand. Let's see. Hey, Nick. So the tool, so the library is what you're going to be talking about. OS7 library is going to, and this is going to take me some time. So the OS7 library, I have started parts of it, but parts of it are still waiting on other things to get finished. In the OS7 library, when I have the update done, each style will have the ability to have the special abilities as well as other things in the style code that talk both to the prop and to the font to enable all the new stuff that I showed in my proof of concept. And there's so many. That's why I said it's probably going to be a couple of videos talking about special abilities, talking about how they work, how to set them up, how to use them. But that's what they are. It's not defines in the style code, though. It's defines are only work in your config, and all defines do, as I said, the define is just used by the compiler when you're putting together the OS to pick and choose what parts, what code gets added. They have names and stuff to make it easy for the user, but really they're just chunks of code that either get included or don't get included. The styles, though, have a bunch of new ability in style code that make them able to, the best way to describe it, as I said earlier, is kind of like turning the style code into an app. Because now instead of just the style code used to just control the visual effects, the lights, how your LEDs responded, but because of all the changes we've made in OS7, the style code does that, and then the style code also, if set up properly, can tell your font to do different things, and it can also now tell my prop to do different things. So that's where it comes into play. So it's really, you wouldn't be setting up defines, but you would be setting up additions to your style code that would enable things that are similar to what defines do. I guess that's, well, there will be more coming on that. That's a definite rabbit hole to go down, but it's not defines added to the style. It's actually, it is style code. It's just there's a bunch of new functions that are introduced in OS 7 that enable all these other features. Let's see. Yeah, so yeah, not defines, but yes, the goal for the OS 7 library is to make all this very easy for users. So good question. It depends. So at the basic level, if you take an existing config from OS 6 and add OS 7 features to it, you're going to use up a little more memory because we added more. But I have a bunch of memory saving stuff coming. There's a few things that are already there. Actually, let me pull this down for 1 second. It's minor, but it helps. There is a new define in OS 7. Where the heck are you? This guy was one that I put in. I think it saves like 7,500 bits, which is 2%, which depending on the style, it could add another style or two. Disable talkie. So everybody knows when you forget your SD card or font directory not found, that little computerized voice, not the voice prompts. So not the voice prompts from the common folder. The one that plays when nothing's there. Those are built-in spoken. They call them. They're called talkies, but it's built-in code into the OS that lets that happen, because it's meant that if the SD card. So normally on your Proffie board, all your sounds are generated by your SD card. Well, the OS by default since day one had spoken error messages, because if the SD card was missing or damaged or not readable, the user would never know anything. So Frederick has the talkies built in, and it's that really weird voice, particularly when you're on USB power that you'll hear. But those take up a good piece of memory. I actually ran into them in OS 6, and when I was trying to mess around in OS 7, I brought it up to Frederick that, hey, we could probably save memory if we turn them off. So what happens is if you disable Talkie, you're not going to have spoken error messages. You're going to have a sequence of beeps. And actually, Frederick, I had just a couple beeps, and it was really dull. Frederick actually made musical chime beeps. He actually composed several musical things. There is a pod on it in OS 7. I don't have the link handy. But if you use disable Talkie, you're going to save around 2%. I think it was 2%, something like that, of memory. You're just not going to have, if you forget to put your SD card in, instead of having that robotic voice, you're going to have a sequence of beeps that are almost musical. And then you'll go and have to take a look at at the pod or memorize what they are. And then that's your error message. So we took away the voice, the talkie for error messages, and made it so that it's just really beeps, because beeps are really small memory. Spoken long strings like that take up actually a good chunk of memory. So there's that. There is a bunch of other stuff coming that should help a little bit in memory. And I got kind of on a tangent, but the real answer is if you don't change anything else but add new features, you're going to use more memory. But there are offsets. There's going to be ways to offset the how you do it. So disable Talkie is a new one that saves some memory. Obviously, if there's a bunch of other ones from previous, the disable basic parser styles is one that if you don't have that active now, you are wasting so much memory. There's also there's a lot of other ways to save memory. The other one that comes into play that for when I see people is mixing styles. So my library is designed so that every style you pull from it is meant to be as efficient as possible. And when used together, they are more efficient than if you use like 5 styles from my library and 5 styles written in a different syntax or written from a different version. And I know the Grayscale, and there's a bunch of font makers out there who provide style code, and people love it, and you can use it. But just keep in mind, most of those styles are not optimized. So when I see people who like say they only get a handful of styles on their config, a lot of times it's not only mixing the syntax, but also mixing the source. So I do have a lot of stuff coming for the OS 7 library. I do plan to have more styles like what Grayscale offered and a bunch of other font makers offered available, just to try to make it so that you can fit more. Because when it comes time to actually put it all together, if you have a style that's written just very differently than another style, that's going to use up more memory than if the two styles are written very similarly. And it's really just a matter of how the compiler is able to kind of save memory. So Frederick's done a lot to write to it, a lot of work on it so that it's able to really condense these styles down and still work. But if you have, it's usually mixing a lot. So particularly if you mix versions, if you have some OS 5 styles mixed with some OS 6 styles, you're wasting a bunch of memory because they are very different. But also if you have some styles that are running, a lot of options on them, but you start mixing them with some of the Grayscale stuff or some of the other stuff that's really just written to be one-offs, there's going to be some memory wasted there. So there's a lot of ways just through the styles you build and where you get those styles and how they come together to also save memory. So longer term, I have a laundry list of videos I have to do. I'll probably eventually try to do a video on how to get the most out of fitting on your saver. And I know I just went way off on tangents, but it's kind of a loaded question. If you just leave everything universal and add new features, yes, you have to use more memory. The new features themselves are functions, and by inherently the functions are actually small because it's really just math, but it's still additional code that needs to be used. Let's see. Seabree Sawyer. Thanks for joining. Anybody who I missed, I didn't do it intentionally. I'm trying to keep up with this chat. Hey, Josh. Oh, Megtooth is still on. Just seeing if there's more questions. Yeah, I mean, that's never a bad thing. I mean, that's depending on your significant other and your bank account. But yes, more savers is always good. For me, it comes up a lot. I change my savers a lot, not only for development, but when I use them. I mean, that's the kind of the thing about Proffie Board, right? Is you can have a mood one week where you want to do this and this and this, and you have a config for that, and then I just make another copy of a config for when I want to do other things. So, I don't even really. Some of my savers, I only have 5 or 6 presets on them because those are the ones I want to use. But if I ever want, I mean, that's also the reason I have the library is not only for you guys but for me. If I want to go and say do something different for this week, or I have family members who haven't seen the cool stuff yet, I'll just go pull down the style and do the upload, and then all of a sudden I got a brand new saver. So sometimes I know people don't love the uploading process, but when people are like, oh, I can only fit like 20 presets on my saber, I'm like, that's pretty good. Like, but I have 500 things I want to do. Oh, okay, so make a bunch of configs and load them differently. If you do plan, I mean, reality, unless you have like a ton of batteries, you're not going to use all those presets. If you have 30, 40 presets, I don't know how you could use them and have the saber still work, unless you're using them for like 2 seconds each. So, there's trade-offs. If you get really crazy with features and really crazy with the styles and add a bunch of new cool stuff, there is a fixed amount of memory available. You will have to kind of pick and choose. Also, the reason for this tool, the config tool, for those running late, is because it will save. You can make up to 6 configs. So you can have one saber, make 6 different configs, store it on this site. Obviously, make backup copies on your SD. So this tool is to help you, and it's to let you come back, and it will save everything. It's saving it to your browser's local storage. But certain computers, Windows in particular, they can mess with that. So I make no guarantees of what your browser is going to do with that information. For how it's described and how it's intended to be used is the local storage that runs the config tool is not supposed to just disappear on you. It's supposed to be the user controls that. But if your browser or your computer goes kaput, that data is gone. So if you make configs in the config tool, it is trying to save them for you up to 6. But make backup copies, save them in more than one place. Even just putting your config on the SD card. SD cards go bad. I've had a couple of SD cards go bad. It seems like of late, in particular, more and more shoddy SD cards are out there. It gets annoying, but don't just trust your configs to one saved location. Save a couple backups. Email yourself some copies. If you have like Gmail or Outlook or whatever, it gets saved for a good chunk of time. But your config is really valuable. So don't ever rely on one backup method for your config. Be sure you have multiple, and that includes my site. I don't want people to come back 6 months from now. Oh, Windows did an update and I lost all my configs, and the only place I had them was on your website, because they're not saved on my website. My website doesn't have that ability. They're saved on your browser. My website just has the ability to talk to your browser. That's all it is. Let's see. Yes, the option styles save a ton of memory, and there is more coming. So there's using functions were something that added to the library in OS 6. We actually took them up a notch for OS 7, and there's been a little bit of discussion. If you guys are in the beta thread, I'm terrible with usernames, but I have a tool coming for that stuff, which will also help both in making the style options even easier to use, but also making it so you can use more of them to save more memory. So as I said, I have several video ideas planned. I have to get a few things working. So I am working on the tools to support this. Then I'll do some live videos to talk through it, take questions. And then I also have, obviously, other stuff in the works. But there are more ways to save memory than what I touched on. as I said, I could probably do a whole hour-long video on that, and we'll get back to it. I have some tools coming that are going to help with that, so I got to get them working first. Yeah, I mean, I've done 20 on a few of my sabers. More just because people, whenever somebody says, "Oh, I only got like 3 presets on my Proffie," and your Proffie's terrible because you can only fit 3, I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell you put on it, because I have one saber that during development I fit like 42 option styles on it, and I think the option styles had a couple hundred possibilities on them. So if I wanted to take the time, I could have done copy preset another 50 times and ended up with like 99 styles and still been perfectly happy and never have a duplicate. So it's possible. It's all planning and setting it up. But the people who like are out there who are like stressed about like, man, I need 99 presets. Like, you're not going to use 99. In one sitting, you are not going to use 99 presets. And the amount of money you would need for batteries to do so means you should probably just buy a couple of sabers and have them all handy. That's my take on it. So if you're one of those people who want to do that and have fun with having the 90 something presets, because it is technically possible, because we do have the ability to copy presets and we do have style options, and you can go over 99 if you wanted to. If you're telling me you're using all 99 in one sitting, or you're showing off all 99 styles to your friend at a con, you're showing them for like 2 seconds and then your battery's dead, because that's not how that works. Yeah, you need a lot. I mean, unless there's some new magical batteries out there. I mean, I have some of the big. I have my primary con saber is my double battery. Why am I forgetting the size? It's the bigger one, and it actually my Kylo saber has 2 batteries built into it, and one of them is replaceable, one of them is backup, and I can run them all the time. And I have 3 backup batteries, and I can go. I think the longest. I mean, I actually get more tired in the costume than before the saber dies, but can run 6-7 hours of the saber with all the batteries I bring. But still, I can't imagine using 90 presets in that period of time. Yeah, I didn't know if you're still on. So MyCom just kind of came to mind as what I called a mini MyCom. I know it's not the same thing, but we can talk about that one day. Maybe one day, we'll jump on a live stream and talk about a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I haven't tried those SD cards yet. Yeah, I actually had. I mean, I still have some old Proffies that I bought during the first 2.2 run from KR, and they all came with SD cards. And knock on wood, all those SD cards were good. It was when I started getting some of the stuff during COVID. I got a couple of boards with a couple of SDs, and that's when I started noticing some SDs just being kind of shoddy. And I also noticed a huge uptick in users with SD card problems. There was one issue that was somewhat tied to a certain run of KR boards that was in the discussion for a while. I think we never figured out exactly what it was. It might have been partially software, partially hardware, because it was a weird setup. But that said, I also had SD cards from that same time that I would take the SD card, brand new, put it in an old Saber, and it still had problems. So I don't think it was just the board. I think it's also some of the SD cards just, I'm guessing with shortages or, whatever with the pandemic, that some of the materials maybe weren't so great. But there has been an uptick. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, that backup. That's the best way to go about it. Unfortunately, at my machine, because I do dev for OS, I actually have like every iteration of the OS that I've been playing with. So I can sometimes I grab the wrong INO and I'll load up like an old. Sometimes I'll load up like one of the original OS7 versions that was way different than what even made it to alpha, because during development I kind of tinker and I put my own stuff together, and then Frederick contributes his stuff. But I'm an amateur. I'm not a programmer. good at following directions. I understand enough syntax to do certain things, but I also understand that I don't understand a fraction of what Frederick knows. So I will often, even my proof of concept videos, some of those are running code that it's kind of MacGyvered to make it work, more just so I can prove both to the community and to Frederick that, hey, this is a cool capability. But then once Frederick actually gets a hold of it, or we start talking back and forth, he cleans it up into like the real code that's going to make the OS. So if I grab some old versions of stuff I have on my local machine and load it up, sometimes I forget that I grabbed the wrong one, and all of a sudden it acts weird for me, and I'm confused because I'll get weird errors and stuff. So keep backups, but also label them would be a good way to go about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't load up your Saber with a bunch of presets. Just there's a point of diminishing returns where you can have too many presets that you're never going to use. Oh, hey, John, thanks for joining. Yeah, if you're starting from the beginning, you're actually traveled back in time, so you're gonna catch up to this statement after you posted your chat, which is kind of weird. Yeah, removable batteries. Yes, alt fonts. A lot of stuff I'll be doing videos on. That's one of them. So the alt font, for those of you who don't know, is a new capability for OS 6. It needs style code to work properly. And not only does it need style code, it also is part of that synergy stuff. So it needs the font to be set up a certain way. It needs the style code to be able to talk to the font. And then the last piece of that is it needs to also tell the prop how to handle it. So that'll be, I may actually have to do a separate video just on the alt font stuff, but it'll be part of the special abilities when I'm able to talk about that. But that's still a little bit down the road too. I know everybody's loving testing the beta stuff and helping out and all that. I have to we're kind of doing this, at least from my point of view, I'm doing it systemically or in a specific order because certain things are still haven't been fully tested. So I don't want to go spend weeks programming something for the tools that is still in flux. So there's some stuff in the beta that might change. So I can't really do the tools to support it because if it changes, then all the work I put into making the tool goes out the window. So we're kind of, as we move through beta, I'm building parts of the tools like the library and the config tool and some other new tools that are on the way. But I also kind of have to roll them out slowly. And then some of the questions that we have from beta users are tied to tools that are going to be needed to help people be able to do them, but those tools are still waiting on parts of beta to get tested. So it's kind of like there's a domino effect to how this is all going to come together. As we get further through beta testing and stuff is kind of proven out in its final form, the tools will come together. The tools are going to make it a lot easier, not only for users to set stuff up, but it's easier for me to describe the stuff, because that's the other part of this is that, without me just sitting here talking to a camera is really hard for you guys to follow, versus kind of a tool that does parts of it, shows you how it works, and then gives you some output. Yeah, the mini game is one of those ones. So the mini game is the mini game also has a font element that's coming into play. So I made my own sounds from other people's fonts to set up the mini game, but I can't obviously share those because I don't own them. So I have to work with a couple of font makers to show them how this stuff works, and then they can make the supported sounds and then make those available. Now, users can make their own, or if they have fonts that have sounds, they can manipulate them like I did. But the other part of it is the original mini games that were written in the dev code that I did a long time ago that actually large chunks of it are completely different. So I have to rewrite it. And it's on the list, but I haven't gotten to it yet, but that's coming. The A&H training remote's the one everybody keeps asking me for. It's on my list of things. I do have a lot of stuff coming, so that'll be there. I can't guarantee it's going to be part of beta. It might not come out until the full release, though, just because those mini game style codes are very complex because they're almost like mini video games. Let's see. Yeah, alt font. There is a thread. Let me see if I can find it on the Crucible. It's pretty. It's actually not hard. Let me find it. So we'll go ProffieOS. I actually have threads in here that nobody ever used. They were originally meant for questions like this, but let's get to it. I know I built it. And if anybody on this or coming in later hasn't been on the Crucible, join the Crucible because there's everything you need to know is going to be here, and it's also the easiest place to get answers. I know I made it. Man, it's been a long time, huh? There we go. All font way down here. I'll put this in the video description after because that's on a different computer. But I described it, but there should be a write-up on it. Yes, here's the write-up. So it's conceptually it's pretty easy. It takes work and planning, so you have to know what sounds you want. But and Mountain Sabers can speak to this. You can set up all fonts now. They just won't do anything because they are tied to the synergy. I'm calling it synergy. Frederick didn't have a name for it. I'm a marketing guy, so I give everything names. It's both so I can keep track of stuff, but also just fun to come up with names. So the synergy effects are where the style code talks to the font, or style code will talk to the prop. So the style code is the missing piece for everybody. So Mountain Sabers, I think you were one of the guys, and I know there's a few other people who've asked about them, and they said, "Hey, I set my alt font up based on this page." Great. You're already ahead of the game. But setting up the style code to do it and then using the style code to tell the prop what to happen is the next piece of the puzzle that I will be doing a video on. So you can read up on it and set them up here. There's one implementation you can do straight off, and it was posted somewhere, but it's a little bit. It's kind of like it's the safety net feature, but it doesn't work the best in my opinion, but it's there. It's the sync. Let me go back to the beta thread. What the heck was it called? It was kind of a way for us to kind of force feed alt font into the default prop. I just have to find the thread. What was, I forget the name of it. There it is. So this right here, let me get this, I'm just going to move this out of the way. So this is not the best way, I'll say. From the purpose behind the alt fonts was to work with style code and to have it controllable by the style. But if, and this is where the tough part comes in, if you go back to some of the old OS 5 styles, they used rotate colors X with variation. If you use those styles and you put a layer in that uses the sync alt to variance function, which would just be kind of its own layer, it will do the alt font, but it does it with color change, and it does not work very well with the color wheel. So it's not what I would recommend, but it does exist. Now, you can do the color change style. If you do a simple color change style, then you would you do a color change style with, like, say, red, blue, green, and then you would set up an alt font with 000, 001, 002, and then you would want to use color change direct, which is a define, and then you want to put the layer in that does sync alt to variance, and then that would match up your alt font to the color change. within reason. The reason sync alt to variance is not great is because if you do more colors than you have alts, or if you do more alts than you have colors, you can get out of sync. Versus the other ways that we're building using the synergy. So it is there, it is available. It's probably not tested if somebody wants to mess with it, but it is a little bit finicky, and it's if you want to really get the most out of the alt fonts, the way to do them will be through the special abilities and other stuff. But we always have fallbacks. That would be the fallback, but it's not easy to set up because it doesn't work with the styles people want it on. That's kind of the issue. It's kind of it's using older. The variation is a little bit older approach versus the OS 6 arguments, and they don't play nice together. So that's the other part of it is OS 6 style code doesn't really like variation because variation essentially enables the color wheel, which is the default mechanism that chooses all colors in a spectrum. But edit mode, the variation applies to all colors on the blade at all times. Edit mode took that concept and broke it apart, and it made it so that every effect has its own color that's editable individually. So you have a base color, you have all colors, you have a blast color, a lockup color, ignition color, all the colors. I think we had 16 editable colors in OS 6. So because of that, variation can't be used with the color arguments because they work very differently. So if you try to use the sync alt to variance on an OS 6 style, you're going to have some issues. You're either going to have problems. It's either not going to change the variation, or if you do change the variation, you're going to have problems with your color editing or any styles that contain color editing. So it is there. It's really intended for OS 5 styles, is how I would kind of say it. And it's more so intended for very specifically built color change OS 5 styles. It will not. I don't even know if we tested it on an OS 6 style, but it's there. But for everybody who wants the alt fonts, I am working on the tool. And then once the tool's ready, we'll be able to talk more about it. And really, because I need to be able to have a way for you to set it up in the style so that you can set your font up and then it would be able to work properly. And then, like I said, it's part of that special ability stuff. So I will be doing a video hopefully in a few weeks on special abilities. I have to get the tool ready, and then I have to get some demo styles built out, and then we'll go from there. But we can probably cover that a little bit more. But long story short, this thread here, if you want to start learning about all fonts, just search it. It is pretty far down because it's been a while. If you have a question, you can post it in there. But unless you want to go and build a style yourself, and you would just use the functions that are listed in the beta, it's going to be a little bit harder to get the all font working exactly as the demo show unless you know how to write the style code. So that's why I'm trying to get some demo styles together, get some tools that'll make it easier for people to use them, and then kind of roll that all out. So there'll be more videos coming, and that'll be definitely in there. There's so much, there's a lot, even stuff that even in the beta test, I don't think there's stuff people even realize is there. So going to be a lot of stuff to cover. Let me see. Hey, Brian's back. Is there any more questions? Otherwise, I'm probably going to start to wrap up because it is getting a little late here. Actually, I went way longer than I thought it would. I thought you were the one who asked. I've had a couple people ask. I do have some stuff in the works, but it's kind of like I need to get it done and tested, and then we'll roll it out. Cool. If there's no other questions in the next minute or so, I'm probably going to sign off here. And then, as I said, I have a lot in the works. I do have updates coming to the config tool. I do have a bunch of styles that I have to get converted over so that they can be tested. And then, obviously, the OS 7 library. That's kind of, I've started the groundwork for the OS 7 library, which is it's going to take everything from the OS 6 library like up probably past 11 on the dial. So a lot of stuff coming, but obviously I have to put the work in on it. So cool. Well, I think we're good for tonight. I do hope to get on again in a few weeks. I've been kind of splitting time, so I'm doing a lot of stuff all in little chunks, and then as I get stuff done, I'll either do if I don't have time for a live video, I shoot the little side videos and I'll post them. But whenever it's a bigger topic or I think people will have questions, I'll try to do a live one. But with my schedule, it's hard now, so I probably only realistically get a time for a live video maybe once a month, and there's a lot to cover. So I'm going to try to squeeze as much as I can into each one of these. So definitely come back. If you have questions, definitely post them in the Crucible. I will try to answer what I can. The stuff that's more complex, the mini game styles, I have to create those and make them so that users can actually use them. It's very hard to describe how to write that. It's not something that I can just shoot a video and people are going to be able to build them. It is much more along the lines of planning, thinking out how a game would work, and then designing a style around it. The alt font stuff, as I said, that kind of ties into three pieces. It's the font, it's the style code, and then it's the special abilities in the prop that have to come together to make all that work properly. So that's where I'm getting the tools together so that it makes it easier for you to be able to just drop that stuff in instead of having to worry about trying to line these things up. You will still have to do the edits to your font, but the other parts of it, I'm trying to make it so that it's something you can just kind of grab and go versus having to sit there and plan it out. And the bulk of it's going to be the library, but I'm going to try to get some demo stuff out before the library because the library still has a lot of work left. But thanks everybody who joined. Anybody who's watching this at a later time, thanks for coming on. And I'll talk to you guys all soon. So everybody have a great night. Thanks.